Half of the country experiencing clear skies. Some of that white there is snow cover, but a little bit of weather going on in the southwestern U.S. And there it is, a compact little system moving through the Four Corners area, seeing the sights, checking out Grand Canyon and the Painted Desert, and heading into New Mexico. Let's take a look at the surface map and break it down. Well, no question, this afternoon we have a strong weather system moving through Albuquerque down to Las Cruces. But why don't we start out with the eastern U.S. and work our way west. Out east we have a departing weather system. The center of that is off Nova Scotia. Things look pretty frozen around Boston. Some footage from Matthew Kunsick, and the snowfall totals for today look like this, looking at about 1 to 3 inches. As that system departs to the east, cold air advection coming into the back of the system. The temperatures in the wake are not particularly cold, looking at low 30s to upper 20s. Same story out there in upstate New York. Some of that precipitation is in the form of liquid. And as you go out towards the Appalachians and Ohio, the Midwest, temperatures still remain in the 30s, but some significant cold air advection. Down in the southeastern U.S., not much cold air coming down that way. The flow mostly out of the west. Temperatures only in the 40s and 50s. But in the wake of that, some nice clearing around Atlanta and Nashville. Looking at the central U.S., ridging. And with that ridging, we get clear skies, and last night that allowed a view of a meteor, which streaked across the Tulsa area about 3:40 a.m. This is what it looked like from some of the security cameras in that area. Here's a look at how visible that meteor was, and if you look right there in the center, you can actually see the projected track represented by that blue line. So quite a few people saw that fireball come through. And that's not the only significant news to come out of Oklahoma. Oklahoma City experiencing their 20th day in a row 50 degrees or warmer. And there's the proof, 72 degrees there on New Year's Day, and just running 50s and 60s all the way down to today. And as we record this, they're already up to 57 degrees. But as we can see, some changes coming from the west. We'll cover that in just a minute. Let's head up north into that big ridge, and we get back into that fog there in North Dakota. That fog has been very, very persistent over the past month, picking up snow all the way up to Ontario and Manitoba. And yesterday, as that other system came through Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, some snow, anywhere from 2 inches up to 8 inches. And some isolated reports up to 11 inches. That's mostly around Ashland, Wisconsin. I went through Ashland back in 2002, around this time of the year, stopping at Burger King for a quick lunch. Here's a few pictures from the trip I took up in Lake Superior. That was together with the College DuPage conference in 2002. Very scenic on Lake Superior during the winter. Anyway, let's move on. Yep, the southwest, a compact little system moving through New Mexico. You can see the west winds coming back in behind that. 52 at Phoenix at this hour, 47 at Las Vegas. So this is not super cold, but it is bringing in some fresh Pacific air. And you can see it changes around to northerly winds in Utah. But not a whole lot of precip being indicated, mostly just around that surface low and some snow showers back behind it. However, this will be tracking towards southeastern Colorado and bringing snow showers and blowing snow to Raton, Las Vegas, New Mexico, and out towards Springfield, Colorado. And this is what it looks like on the AWIPS system. What I've set up here is almost identical to what the Weather Service forecasters would be looking at. Basically the same software package and the same products. And this is pretty similar to what I used in the Air Force. We had a very similar system called AWIDS. So let's take a look and see what we got here. This is obviously convective precip. That's cumuliform type clouds, somewhat shallow, but enough to produce some rain and snow showers. And I've also got the potential temperature field. You can see the legend right down here indicating that's for 21Z. And what this shows us, well, we have to kind of figure out where the warm potential temperature is and where the cooler potential temperature is. And when we talk about potential temperature, that's basically just the temperature reduced to a common level, and it kind of removes some of the orographic effects. So what do we see here? Well, we've got a warm wedge. I don't know if you can see that, but that's it right there. That's warm air out there in central New Mexico. And we can use a ridge symbol. It's not a pressure ridge, but it is a thermal ridge, and that shows us where the warm sector is, and we can kind of use that as a reference for finding the fronts. Now, where's the cold air? Well, that's going to be back up in this area. Potential temperature is about 288, 289, and what else do we have? Yeah, 288 and 289 around Phoenix, so that also is cold air. So thermal ridge here, thermal trough, and that puts the front right in the middle. And you can kind of see a gradient in between where the packing of those red lines is tighter. And that would be a good first guess of where the cold front is. And we can look at the surface plots. We see 62 at El Paso with a southwest wind. That would indicate some fairly warm conditions, and then it cools off to 57, then 53 at Deming, 48 at Silver City, and that's probably about where we pick up the front. So I might adjust that a little bit ahead out in this area here. Now Albuquerque, 45 with a southwest wind, gusty. That would probably be post-frontal air, and that contrasts with 50 out there around Santa Rosa and 60s down around Roswell. So let me draw that front. It's probably not precisely where it is. Where's the warm front? I'm not totally sure. I don't really see it in the potential temperature data, but looking at the plots, I might go something like that. We go from 50 at Tucumcari up to about 60 here, and that's probably the kind of transition we're looking for. And then the rest of it is going to be an occlusion up towards Farmington. So the triple point located right around here. It's going to be south of Klein's Corner. So that gives you some information to look at. And you can see in the wake of that, snow showers all the way back to Winslow, Flagstaff, and maybe down to the Mogollon Rim. And we might as well take a quick look at the dynamics. There's the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. So this is indicating the jet max in southern Arizona. The axis of the jet stream, about like that. And this is for 18Z. Right now it's 21Z as we record this. So as we go forward to 0Z, it moves a little bit to the east. We're kind of in between that right now. But looking at these fields, the strongest vertical motion at 18Z right there, and at 0Z spreads rapidly out there towards Clayton, Springfield, and Trinidad. So as we record this, the stronger vertical motion out over Albuquerque towards Santa Fe, and then this evening spreading to the east. So by midnight, it will already be heading for Garden City, Dodge City, Amarillo, and kind of an elongated jet axis about like that. And with that cold air coming into Arizona, they've got freeze alerts for parts of the lower valleys. California as well, getting some of that cool air, 50s and some upper 40s this afternoon. Heading up north, high pressure in the Great Basin region. Looks like 30s and a few 20s this afternoon. 12 degrees at Burns, Oregon. And then heading up north, we've got a powerful system off of southeastern Alaska. There it is. Pretty wrapped up there. It looks like a 975 millibar low. Pretty large rain field around that. Some tragic news out of Alaska. They've had the first polar bear fatality in 32 years. That was in Wales, located right there, about 100 miles northwest of Nome. I don't know if the weather was a factor in all that, but apparently the bear was not in its typical habitat and was coming into the villages looking for food. Heading up into northern Canada, continued cold. The cold pole has been sitting up in this region for quite a while. Minus 47 at Eureka, that's the coldest temperature on the map. And we've got numerous minus 20s and minus 30s, all the way down to Victoria and Baffin Island. But a strong little baroclinic system there in southwest Nunavut, 990 millibar low on that one, with northwesterly flow blowing into Hudson Bay. Then heading back into Quebec and the Maritimes, we get back into that outgoing Nova Scotia system that did dump some snow in the St. Lawrence Valley area. 5 inches at Montreal, 5 inches of snow, and 7 inches elsewhere in Quebec. And they're expecting some very heavy snow in the next 24 hours in southeastern Newfoundland. They're expecting as much as 18 inches around St. John's. I just have to check back in on Siberia because we had those crazy temperatures. Last week it was down to minus 80, the coldest temperatures in 20 years in Russia. And we're not down to those levels this morning, but still running extremely cold. Minus 73 at Tongulak, not Jampa, it's actually Tongulak. And the cold areas of Russia, the cold poles, for those of you who follow that kind of climatology, Oymyakon. That's the record for Russia. The coldest temperature observed. Also Verkhoyansk in the old days that had the coldest temperature ever observed, but they're running a little bit warmer than what we've had out in the valley regions. But some of that cold air, like we talked about last week, has spread down into China. So this is China. Look at those temperatures in that area, down to minus 50. The coldest temperature that I found was minus 61 at Jingtao, located right about there. But that does not break the all-time record for China. That was set in 2009 with minus 72. However, at the official observing sites, like you see on this map, these are the coldest temperatures observed since 1969. So we've been talking about cold, 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 but there's actually been some heat waves here and there, like in the Black Sea, almost 70 degrees in Crimea. And some areas in this region have been up near 70 degrees, not quite to 70, but I know some temperature records were set in Moldova last week, I believe, or earlier this week, I think. And you can see down there around Istanbul in Turkey, 70s, which is also quite warm for this time of year. They should be much cooler, down in the 40s and 50s. Some all-time record lows were set in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. This was last week, and I'm going to show you how this came together. All in all, this was a pretty severe cold wave. The Taliban reported 78 deaths in Afghanistan. You can see there's no data there. The Taliban is not really into sharing weather data. But here we've got this cold front coming in from the northwest, and we'll kind of follow that going into the 8th of January, the 9th. You can see back on the 8th it was raising dust in a few areas. The winds picking up dramatically. And as it moved through Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, temperatures fell. You can see snow on the 10th of January right there. And the cold air did hit the mountains and got slowed down a little bit, but eventually it made it through. And by the 13th, this is when the severe cold hit. You can see minus 15 right there, minus 12, and very likely that zero line was well down into Afghanistan. So that was certainly some severe cold. Not too sure what happened to the front after that in Pakistan and India. I mean, that should have moved on through. If it became a front aloft, that should have dispersed a lot of this fog and haze, but it did not do that, so I'm not really too sure what happened there. But that cold air did kind of work into India, and then we started seeing some moderation, and we bring that up to the current date, and it is warmer, back up to the 30s in Afghanistan. And some record heat in Argentina. Yesterday they had 100 degrees at Resistencia and Salto, and we are seeing 102 degrees today This was a couple of hours ago, and looks like some convective storms have broken out to relieve the heat in some areas. But yeah, it is a scorcher down there in Argentina and Uruguay. All right, let's bring it on back to North America and look at our forecast. If you keep up on the show, you're probably aware we've got a stratospheric warming event, not a sudden one. It's been kind of a slow, drawn-out process, but that should finish maybe in about a week or week and a half. Also, we're looking at a negative NAO pattern starting to show up, and that means more blocking and less zonal flow out there in the Atlantic. So let's go ahead and look at the forecast here. There's that upper level low we're contending with. That's associated with that New Mexico system. And we're starting to see some ridging out there in British Columbia. This is one of the first signs we've had in a while of a positive PNA pattern. But the Pacific's still wide open. So this is still kind of a transition pattern. Some large waves moving up into British Columbia and Alaska. And on the East Coast, long wave troughing, a fairly deep trough coming into the central U.S., and another one dropping into the southwestern U.S. during the late weekend. So that'll be our next big weather maker. You can see some tendency towards strong ridging on the west coast. This is another sign we may be moving more towards a positive PNA pattern. And there's the polar vortex, the segment of the polar vortex over Baffin Island. That is starting to strengthen a little bit. So going into next week, you can see that tendency for ridging still hanging on there. The polar vortex is starting to broaden a little bit. And you can see that the backside of that polar vortex has a strong northerly component. So that does have the potential to bring some cold air down in maybe about a week from now. That's something we're going to have to kind of watch there. And we go into the following week, 29th, 30th, starting to look a little bit colder there, less troughing out to the west. In fact, this ridging is a pretty good setup for bringing cold air southward, and that could spell the next pattern shift. Now, it does show a little bit of a split flow pattern, so that could keep the precip chances up a little bit with that active southern stream, but this is kind of a ways out, 234 hours. We'll have to check back in on this next week. So I figured I would pull up this stratospheric chart. This is 100 millibars, about 54,000 feet. Now, I can't get any of the 10 millibar charts on here. That's the ones we really need to look at to follow stratospheric warming, but 100 seems to pick up some details. We're looking at the temperature here. So these areas right there, those are going to be some relatively warm temperatures. Then we have very cold temperatures here over Iceland and Spitsbergen. You can see that those are about minus 76 Celsius. And on the other side, Alaska, the Bering Sea, about minus 44. So that's a pretty huge difference in temperature between these two areas. So going forward, over the next 240 hours, this seems to show some rather significant warming later next week. You can see this wormhole start to show up there over Nunavut. And that's probably related to that stratospheric warming. The location of this dipole is exactly the same as it shows on the 10 millibar chart. So what does this mean? I'm not really sure. I don't know if that minus 40, that warm temperature, I don't know if that reflects subsidence, that maybe dries out the upper levels and makes it more transparent to outgoing long-wave radiation. Maybe that will enhance some of the cooling over northern Canada, maybe help that Arctic air start really broadening in size, in volume. I'm not really too sure how the physics works out on that. If you have some expertise on that, definitely post that. But we are looking for a cooling trend in Canada in the next couple of weeks. And that's the last image I have right there. Stratospheric warming, at least in the lower parts of the stratosphere, pretty much set up right there over Western Canada and Alaska. Now, one way we can evaluate the changes in the air mass is to look at the 850 millibar chart. We're looking at Canada and the northern U.S. We've got the heights in black, which is pretty similar to surface pressure, and we've got the 850 millibar temperature in red. And the shading, those are going to be advection areas, temperature advection. Warm is red and blue is cold. Now, what we see here starting out, we've got that system we talked about earlier in Nunavut. You can definitely make out the frontal positions. So this is going to drop southeast and carry much of the cold air out there into northern Quebec. And there it goes. Not too much effect for the U.S. itself. And then the atmosphere kind of recharges a little bit. You can see one wave heading south right there. But take a look up there in northern Yukon, northern Alaska. This is getting into the midweek period. You can see a low pressure area coming together right there. So that's a wave pretty far west. And as that sets up with that northwesterly flow, that's going to take a track more towards the U.S. So let's draw out those fronts right there. This is approximate. That appears to be where the front is. This is going to be next Wednesday. The blue area representing that cold air advection in the wake of that. You can see that dropping south and gaining steam. It's going to be a good punch of cold air. And there it is, coming south through the prairies on Thursday and into the U.S. on Friday. Now, my gut feeling is that'll affect mostly the typical areas, the Great Lakes, the northeastern U.S. But, you know, this is 160, 170 hours out. We'll have to see. And look at that wide open northwesterly flow all the way down into the central U.S. So, yeah, that's definitely going to shunt some cold air southward. And you can see the 850 millibar temperatures down to minus 20 and below. I did want to run that back to the beginning. There's that system in the Maritimes, and this is the area that's expecting to get snow. You can see that system developing south of Newfoundland. Strong warm air advection north of that warm front, which is located about right there, a little bit to the south, and the occlusion coming around back to the west. So that'll graze Newfoundland, and then we get the wraparound cold air advection later on Saturday. And about that time, the snow should come to a close. And then you can see more fun develop in the northeastern U.S. early in the week. That's a little nor'easter trying to get going on Sunday into Monday. And that will track through the Gulf of St. Lawrence and probably have a much larger impact on the Maritimes. And let's look at things here in the U.S. It's kind of hard to pick out that southwestern system, but we can see the packing of those thickness lines. This is going to be 6 a.m. this morning. So the fronts are located kind of in here. The wave comes through that region. There's the precip field, and that picks up that boundary as we get into the evening. So there it is coming together. There's the low pressure. That's going to be 18Z, and then the evening chart looks like this. So now the system is moving through much of New Mexico and into the panhandles. So that'll continue moving eastward during the night and into tomorrow and out into Arkansas and Missouri. And there it goes. I think at this point the fronts are going to run something like this out over the Gulf Coast area, so thunderstorms once again for the southeastern U.S. And then it moves into the northeastern region. There it is, a nor'easter developing. That's going to be Sunday night. And you can see that there's more energy out there in the southwestern U.S. There's the frontal gradient, the thermal transition zone, and there's the low pressure area, so that's probably our next system trying to come together for Monday. Anyway, that other nor'easter out there passing over Nova Scotia, heading into the Gulf in that area, and then down in the southwestern U.S. looking something like that, still developing that system, and there it is, gradually coming together. This is rather far south, and this has the potential to bring some snow to the panhandles. There's the 540 decameter thickness line, and generally north of the 540 is where you have the frozen precipitation. So this is definitely going to bear watching. Anywhere north of the low, that's always a area of concern for inclement weather. So that'll head on off to the east for Tuesday. There it goes. The front's running about like that. And of course the comet cloud, that's going to run about, probably a little bit bigger than that, but it's going to run something like that. And then the dry slot working in from the southwest. Anyway, that'll move off into the southeastern U.S. There it is. And crossing over the Appalachians into the northeast for early Thursday. After that, it looks like a big, broad, cold high moving in. And then here comes that punch of cold air from Canada. You can see that sweeping into the Great Lakes area. Now, very likely ahead of that, with that downslope flow, maybe some warm conditions. A little bit of a warm-up maybe in the southern plains. And, yeah, as I figured, most of the cold air heads to the northeastern U.S. Anyway, yeah, there still will be a little bit of a northerly gradient, offshore flow into the Gulf, and a little cutoff low off of California. And after that, don't see any big changes just yet, but we'll have to monitor this gradient here as well as this one in Montana. Well, I did not expect to run 26 minutes on this video. I don't know if we should be running these videos that long or if you prefer it shorter. Leave a YouTube comment, please, and let me know your opinion on this matter. I suspect the people that don't like it probably left already. Hopefully not. Otherwise, yeah, we'll see you back here on Monday for the supporters and Wednesday for everybody else. I try to do 4 shows every week, but that's a little bit tough. I'll try to get back to that when I can, so please be patient on that. Thank you to our many supporters, people like Ron Chalfant, Ed Davies, David Fick, Brian Haggerty, Jason McKittrick, Daniel Park, Adam Rolfs, Luke Victor, Jason Walls. Thank you all so much for helping to support the program. I never thought this would run as long as it did. I thought we would be doing this for maybe 2 or 3 years, but I think we're running on 6 years now. All right, hope you have a great weekend. Talk to you later, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.